stories making the headlines at this hour. South Korea's exports returned to an upward trend for the first time in 14 months, driven by auto exports. To this, the country logged another current account surplus despite a service account deficit due to increased overseas travel. President Yoon Suk-yeol will depart for the Netherlands next Monday, seeking to build a chip alliance. Yoon sees a stronger chip supply chain as boosting the country's defense industry as the president lays out South Korea's goal of becoming one of the world's top 4 arms exporters. The U.S. Congress has agreed on the final defense policy bill. It includes keeping U.S. troops in South Korea at the current level and deepening the Seoul-Washington alliance on nuclear deterrence. Good afternoon. South Korea's exports returned to an upward trend for the first time in 14 months, driven by auto exports. To this, the country logged another current account surplus despite a service account deficit due to increased overseas travel. Moon Hye-ryun has the details.
South Korea's current account has logged a surplus yet again on the back of improving performance in exports and a decline in imports. Preliminary data released by the Bank of Korea on Friday showed a current account balance of $6.8 billion in October. This is the 6th month in a row for a surplus to be recorded and is also the highest so far this year. The goods account tracking imports and exports experienced a surplus for the 7th straight month as auto exports rose and imports of raw materials fell. Data show that auto exports rose by 21% compared to the same month last year, whereas inbound shipments of gas fell by over 54% and coal by 26%. It's the first time since August 2022 that the country has seen an on-year rise in export value, rising by 7.6% compared to October last year. When comparing the goods balance between January and October this year and last year, this year's export value was lower. But as the import value was also lower, the overall goods balance for the period was higher this year. However, the services balance, which includes earnings and spending on overseas trips and transport, recorded a deficit of $1.25 billion. The travel and transportation sectors showed significant declines on year, with the latter falling from a $1 billion surplus to a $300 million deficit this October. So far this year, the services balance logged a deficit of over $20 billion, which is a sharp decline compared to the same period in 2022, when a deficit of just over $3 billion was recorded. Increased outbound travel as a result of eased COVID-19 restrictions has led to a continued travel balance deficit, but the decline is slowing.
The trade balance deficit has decreased with more tourists from Southeast Asia and Japan.
Meanwhile, the primary account balance responsible for monitoring foreign workers' wages and overseas dividend payments reported a surplus of nearly $3 billion, further contributing to the overall current account surplus. Moon Hye-ryun, Arirang News.
We're still a few weeks away from Christmas, but the holiday has arrived early in the retail sector, with local shops and department stores jumping into early Christmas campaigns. Our Lee Soo-jin has a story.
Christmas has already arrived in the retail sector as it's using the winter holiday as a last-ditch marketing strategy to boost consumption. South Korea's CCSI, an indicator of how consumers feel about the economy, has been declining since July. And the pessimistic consumer sentiment is being felt by department stores as operating profits of the big three all fell by double digits in the third quarter. To draw consumers, the big three department stores have built replicas of traditional Christmas markets that are bigger than ever. Here in this colossal glass house are more than 20 wooden chalets that sell seasonal beverages and souvenirs reminiscent of Europe's famous Christmas markets. Although it was inspired by Europe, the market also sells popular Korean street foods such as tteokbokki and fish cakes. To maximize holiday season sales, it was opened toward the end of November and has already encouraged people to spend money.
Oh, it's so beautiful, it's so cute. I really love it. I'm sure that I'll be back to buy things, for sure.
We actually just bought candy apples here, and they were even better than what I imagined.
and on weekends, visitors have to wait hours just to get in. It's not just department stores like this one. They've already begun using Christmas as a marketing strategy to boost consumption. Small businesses have also begun to do the same. Inside this traditional market is a cake shop run by a young entrepreneur. In a nod to her store's location, she sells cakes made out of rice cake ingredients instead of flour. She steams the rice cake into a circular shape and is decorated with colorful frosting along with cake toppers that make it look like the cakes that we typically see in bakeries. She says that she started accepting Christmas cake orders early during the second to last week of November.
Even though this type of cake is usually bought by older people, around Christmas the demand goes up because young people also buy it.
One expert says that all these efforts are likely to pay off.
The Christmas markets and cakes will act as a catalyst of sorts that lead people to purchase items not holiday-related as well.
She added that while consumers this year might not have a large disposable income, these early Christmas marketing campaigns will motivate customers to open up their wallets. 이수진, Arirang News.
President Yoon Suk-yeol will depart for the Netherlands next Monday. He'll be seeking to build a chip alliance and likely launch a bilateral dialogue channel. Our Oh Soo-young tells more.
South Korea will forge a semiconductor alliance with the Netherlands, along with close partnerships in green energy, defense and high-tech sectors. That's according to President Yoon Suk-yeol's office on Thursday, ahead of his trip to the Netherlands next week. First, amid geopolitical conflicts and economic instability affecting the production of semiconductors, South Korea's biggest export item, Seoul will seek to stabilize supplies of chip-making equipment for its firms. As the Netherlands is home to ASML, the world's biggest manufacturer of lithography machines used to produce over 80% of all semiconductors globally, Seoul hopes to combine Dutch equipment with South Korea's advanced chip manufacturing. With the goal of building a chip alliance across government, firms and universities, Yoon's visit will likely include deals on forming a bilateral dialogue channel on semiconductors, as well as developing joint projects. Joined by the chiefs of memory chip giants Samsung and SK Hynix, the South Korean leader will visit ASML's headquarters, becoming the first world leader to be given a tour of the Dutch company's clean room facility. Yoon's state visit to the Netherlands, the first ever for a South Korean president, comes after the two countries elevated their ties to a strategic partnership last year, agreeing to work together in crucial industries, including semiconductors, artificial intelligence and green energy.
The strategic partnership between Korea and the Netherlands will boast a security that's grounded by value-based solidarity and economic security cooperation that's based on cutting-edge technology. During this state visit, we aim to jointly respond to economic and security crises and find ways to improve supply chain vulnerabilities in strategic industries. To this end, we're discussing ways to establish a new economic and security dialogue body and hold regular consultations.
Yoon's office said the two sides will closely cooperate on common security issues such as North Korea's nuclear threats and support for Ukraine. They will also promote more exchanges and collaboration in the defense industry and emerging security fields, such as the military use of AI and cybersecurity. Furthermore, Yoon's state visit is expected to solidify the groundwork for cooperation in green energy, including nuclear power plants, as the Netherlands aims to build new facilities to increase its clean energy sources. Artificial intelligence, smart agriculture and logistics will also be key agenda items.
We plan to discuss ways to establish an export base for Korean companies at the very center of European trade by utilizing the Netherlands' advanced infrastructure and logistics system.
Economic security has been at the focus of Yoon's diplomatic outreach this year, seeking new markets and business partners for South Korea's export-dependent economy. The country's outbound shipments from October have been recovering from 13 months of negative growth on the back of stronger global demand for semiconductors. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, President Yoon Suk-yeol has laid out South Korea's goal of becoming one of the world's top 4 leading countries in the defense industry, where the country is seeing fast growth. And the president sees his trip to the Netherlands as a way of providing momentum to do so. Kim Do-yeon has more.
South Korea is looking to become one of the world's top 4 defense exporters by 2027 by prioritizing 5 key sectors: space, AI, integrated manned-unmanned systems, semiconductors, and robotics. That's according to the new Sustainable Defense Industry Export Promotion Strategy unveiled by the government on Thursday at the second Defense Export Strategy meeting at Hana Aerospace in Gyeonggi-do Province. Presiding over the meeting was President Yoon Suk-yeol, with relevant government officials and business leaders in attendance.
방위 산업은 우리의 안보와 경제를 함께 뒷받침하는 국가 전략 산업입니다.
Promising the government's support, the president also emphasized that the government, military, and the private sector have to work together to resolve the difficulties the industry currently faces. But South Korea's defense industry has been on the rise. According to the Korea Development Institute, in 2022, South Korea exported $17.3 billion worth of arms, double compared to the year before. And while the exported items were focused on ammunition and ships, they have expanded to jets and howitzers. President Yoon also emphasized the importance of protecting the supply chain for chip-making equipment to push South Korea's defense industry harder, saying this will definitely be discussed with the Netherlands during his state visit next week.
특히 EUV 등 세계 최고의 노광 기술을 보유한 네덜란드와의 반도체 협력은 우리 방산 역량 강화에 큰 기여를 할 것이고 또 방산 수출의 새로운 기회도 마련할 수 있을 것이라고 생각합니다.
After the meeting, he met with 13 young people working in the industry. Encouraging them, President Yoon underscored their importance to the nation's economy.
우리 방위 산업에 그야말로 핵심적인 역할을 하고 있는 이 청년 연구원들을 보니까 정말 든든합니다.
The young professionals share their visions in the industry and even the difficulties they face. President Yoon promised that as they are involved as a key driver to the nation's economy, they will be rightfully compensated. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
South Korea's Hana Aerospace has agreed a deal worth some $2.4 billion to supply Redback armored vehicles to Australia. The Defense Acquisition Program Administration said Friday that Hana Defence Australia signed a contract with the Australian government to sell 129 Redback infantry fighting vehicles. The final decision came 4 months after the South Korean aerospace and defense company was selected as a preferred bidder. This deal is Hana's second for the export of ground-based military equipment to Australia, following a deal to supply K-9 self-propelled howitzers signed in December 2021. The U.S. Congress has agreed on a final defense policy bill. It includes keeping U.S. troops in South Korea at the current level and deepening the Seoul-Washington alliance on nuclear deterrence. An Sung-jin reports.
The U.S. Senate and House Armed Services Committees have reached an agreement on the National Defense Authorization Act, which outlines next year's military spending. The committees announced the NDAA for the 2024 fiscal year on Thursday, which stated that the U.S. government maintained the current number of 28,500 U.S. armed forces in South Korea. The provision also strengthened the U.S. commitment to providing extended deterrence to South Korea. It added that the United States must continue efforts to strengthen military alliances and defense intelligence sharing in the Indo-Pacific region to gain advantage over China. The bill also emphasized that it would reinforce the U.S. alliance with South Korea by fortifying security cooperation on nuclear deterrence, which was highlighted in the Washington Declaration, a mutual defense treaty that was agreed in April on South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol's state visit to the U.S. The explanatory statement by the committees also explained the conditions under which the South Korean military forces could assume operational control of the ROK U.S. combined forces on the Korean peninsula, as Congress asked to evaluate the extent to which the Korean military has achieved the conditions for this. It further requested that the Defense Department report progress to the Congress within 180 days of the enactment of the law regarding the transfer of wartime operational control to Korea. The NDAA had already been passed separately by the Senate and House before being approved by the joint committees. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Along with export curbs on urea, China is now restricting the export of ammonium phosphate, a raw material used in chemical fertilizers. According to the Chemical Fertilizer Network, an online platform for China's chemical fertilizer industry, China's National Development and Reform Commission announced last month the halt of export inspections for ammonium phosphate. New export procedures for ammonium phosphate have been suspended since last month. The Commission did not announce when inspections will resume. South Korea's dependence on China for ammonium phosphate is known to be as high as 95%. And there are concerns that if export controls continue until next year's busy farming season, supply and demand for fertilizers may be affected. Now on to a second front line of the Gaza conflict between Israel and Lebanon. Tensions are escalating on the border as a Hezbollah missile from Lebanon killed an Israeli civilian. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warned Hezbollah of turning Beirut into Gaza if it expands its offensive. Lee Seung-jae with the latest.
Speaking to troops on Thursday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sent a stern warning to Hezbollah, saying that if the Lebanese militant group decides to initiate an all-out war with Israel, it will turn Beirut into Gaza.
If Hezbollah chooses to start an all-out war, then it will, by its own hand, turn Beirut and southern Lebanon, not far from here, into Gaza and Khan Yunis.
The warning from the Israeli Prime Minister came hours after a guided missile attack by Hezbollah killed a 60-year-old man in northern Israel. According to Gaza's health ministry on Thursday, around 350 Palestinians were killed in Israeli-led attacks in a 24-hour span, with another 1,900 injured. It added that the cumulative death toll since the start of the armed conflict has surpassed 17,000, with 46,000 injured. Meanwhile, a U.S. official said the U.S. needs to strengthen its missile defenses around the world due to the wars in Ukraine and in the Middle East, as the burden on its limited missile defense capabilities is increasing. According to Claire Gill, the Deputy Director for Regional Operations and Force Management at a hearing of the House Armed Services Committee's Strategic Forces Subcommittee on Thursday, growing geopolitical tensions around the world are increasingly burdening the U.S. military's integrated air and missile defense capabilities. He said commanders in each region continue to request missile defense units, but the military cannot meet demand and is struggling to strike a balance between high-priority regions and regions that need missile defenses immediately. Thursday's hearing focused on how missile defense systems, such as the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense and Patriot missiles, which are in high demand worldwide but are limited in quantity, are being deployed by region and its plans to secure assets. Also mentioned was U.S. defense missile cooperation with allies like South Korea and Japan. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. The changing government in Argentina appears to have put the long-expected EU-Mercosur trade deal in jeopardy. Leaders of the four nations in the Mercosur trade bloc, Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay and Uruguay, met in Rio de Janeiro on Thursday to discuss the future of the South American common market with the EU trade deal as the main agenda. The EU-Mercosur agreement, which is more than 2 decades in the making and had been expected to be announced at the summit, would create a free trade zone comprising of some 743 million people. But the change of government in Argentina, which is to take place just 3 days after the summit, has derailed the final agreement, as Argentina will leave the decision to the incoming president, Javier Milei. Brazilian President Lula da Silva expressed frustrations as the libertarian Milei has previously said Mercosur serves no purpose. Russia has set the date of the country's 2024 presidential election for March 17. Members of the Federation Council, which is Russia's upper house of parliament, on Thursday voted unanimously to approve the motion. Incumbent President Vladimir Putin, who is in his 4th term in office, has not yet announced his intention to run again, but is expected to do so soon. Under current constitutional rules, Putin is eligible to stay in power for 2 more 6-year terms. While Putin currently has no real challenges to his presidency, as prominent critics of his regime are either in jail or abroad, 2 people, former lawmaker Boris Nadyezdin and Yekaterina Duntsova, a journalist and lawyer, have announced plans to run. Authorities in Colombia and Brazil are cracking down on illegal mining in the Amazon rainforest. According to the Colombian Armed Forces on Wednesday, the countries have destroyed 19 illegal gold mining dredges which were polluting rivers with mercury. Authorities reported that the illegal gold mines were producing about 23 kilograms of gold a month, worth some $1.5 million. The current bilateral operation is backed by the US and targets facilities run by the transnational criminal group Familia del Norte. Those mines reportedly dumped around 114,000 grams of mercury, polluting 68 million liters of water every month. The deepest and largest underground lab in the world became operational on Thursday. The Deep Underground and Ultra-Low Radiation Background Facility for Frontier Physics Experiments is 2,400 meters down underneath the Jinping Mountain in China's Sichuan province. According to scientists, the extreme depth of the facility make it suitable for the study of dark matter. Kim Ji-young, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. It feels more like early spring than winter today. Warm southwesterly winds brought spring warmth to most places. Today should be remembered as one of the warmest December days on record. And speaking of which, this year's autumn was the 3rd warmest autumn on record since 1973. And thankfully, air quality is also decent in most parts of Korea, except in the capital area in Chungcheongdo provinces, where the dust level could go up high in the afternoon. Meanwhile, a dry advisory has remained in place for nearly 3 weeks in parts of the East Coast, so please be careful with anything that could start a fire. We are enjoying bright skies today with an expected high of 16 degrees Celsius here in the capital. Daegu, Daejeon, Gwangju, and Busan will all see highs at 19 degrees this afternoon. The warming trend continues through the weekend with rain in the forecast next Monday, but temperatures will stay above norms next week as well. Then a week after will be a bone-chilling one. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
South Korea's arms exports are growing faster than any other country, jumping by 177% in the 5-year period up to 2021. Playing a major role is the country's largest defense company, Hanwha. And the Wall Street Journal pointed to the company's rapid speed of production as a major selling point. Its self-propelled K-9 howitzers were shipped to Poland just 3 months after signing the contract, while European companies take years. Analysts say the system was built as South Korea had to be able to ramp up its production amid threats from North Korea. And the country also holds a unique competitive position at this very time, where the U.S. and other countries are seeing supply issues due to the war in Ukraine. That is all for today. Thanks for watching.